Hello, it's time for a June veg garden tour. I'm Liz Zorab and this is Byther Farm. Previously this had broad beans in it. I checked a few pods to see what the beans were looking like. They were looking big and fat and healthy, so I harvested the lot, only to discover that probably the pods that I tried might have been the only pods that were big and fat and healthy, and so my harvest is in fact much smaller than I would have wanted it to be. The beans will taste super because they're small and very sweet, but we don't have the volume that I was expecting. But anyway, what I did was, rather than pulling the plants out, I've cut off the stems so they're in there and their root systems will just break down. And it does look like some of the plants are trying to regrow, so maybe we'll have another little tiny harvest towards the end of the year. In their stead, I have created a polyculture. So on this side there are some chard, some rainbow chard. In the centre there's a single row of cabbages, and that's a variety called Filderkraut, and it does a pointed head of cabbage. And then on this side I have planted out the leeks. They are so easy to plant out, it's such a simple process. I use the handle from an old spade, push it into the ground to create a hole, and just drop the plant in, feeding in its roots, and then just give it a water. And in fact I didn't water these in because it was raining when I did it, and since then we've had quite a substantial amount of rain. So they're looking fairly strong and healthy. Given that they only went in 48 hours ago, I'm very pleased with how upright and how strong they're looking. Here in bed number 2, the French beans are doing really well. I can see some of them just starting to come into flower. There are 3 different varieties in here. There's a purple teepee, there's a green one, which I can't remember the name of the green bean, and then there is a yellow one, which I think is Sinesta, that rings a bell. And then on this side there are some lettuce and some dahlia, and on the far side there are some parsley and some thyme. So this bed I'm really pleased with. Oh, I've just remembered the other thing that's in here is there are some clumps of dill. It's an annual herb, so and they will grow quite tall. The netting is actually on to dissuade the cat from using this as a toilet, but once the dill gets a bit higher then I will take the netting off. And this bed is a real mixture. There's lots of pots that I've put around the edge of plants waiting to go down into the flower garden. But in here I've got 2 courgettes, and that variety is Genovese. That one has produced flowers, it's producing fruits. This one is only just starting to produce its male flowers, but they'll come. There's a very lovely creeping thyme over there, and there are various different herbs in here for cutting to make potpourri and also to make infusions to drink. And round on this side this week I've added some more calabrese in here, so that will grow and give us a harvest later in the year. There's still quite a lot of space that I can use in this bed, and I'll be filling that up with other plants as the season goes along. Here in bed number 4, it is flanked on each side with these very lovely Welsh onions. So they are, fabulous smell. They're a perennial onion, a bunching onion, and you can harvest them for the leaves or you can lift them and use the bulbs. I've been harvesting the leaves and using those in an awful lot of my cooking. And then in the centre at this end I've got Babington leeks, including this one which is going to seed, producing bulbils and new plants. That's very exciting. Then there are some lupins. I put these in here to grow on before I move them over to the flower garden. I'm really pleased. They just look wonderful, and coincidentally a poppy has self-seeded itself in here, and he's a really similar colour to the lupins, so it's actually worked really nicely. So these will be going, and then there will be more space to plant, but for now I'm just going to let them flower. And over there is some bergamot, in fact dotted right through this garden. There's lots of bergamot because I love the flavour, so that's also called monarda or bee balm. In here is a row of beetroot. This is a Chioggia beetroot, and I'm really pleased with how well this has done. I sowed this in late autumn last year, and it has been quietly growing on. Well, it's now got to a really good size, and I've been harvesting that. So Mr. J and I have had our first meal of beetroot. I did a pickled beetroot, and I pickled it in a chive vinegar, and I served that with a cream cheese mousse. Mr. J had his plain, and I had mine with a little horseradish in it. Next to that, we've then got one of my favourite mustards. So this is called mustard Oriental Frills, and when you first take a bite of it, it's got an almost caramelised taste to it. It's quite sweet, and then the more you chew it, the more fiery it gets. Very nice. And then at this end are some very mature lettuces. These are great because you can harvest some of the leaves from around the outside, and it carries on growing in the centre. And there's also a sweet Sicily and some nasturtiums, which I grow for their wonderful edible flowers, but you can also eat the leaves and you can eat the seeds. So in this bed, which I'm calling number 5, are potatoes. They're just coming into flower now. So hopefully it won't be too long before I can harvest some of those. And there's also plenty of calendula. I use those flowers in cooking quite a lot and in salads. And in the trays at the front here are plants waiting to go into the ground when the potatoes come out. And then bed number 6 at the end here is some skirret. It's a perennial vegetable grown for its roots. It has really pretty white flowers. I'm quite happy that's about to flower. I can see plenty of new growth coming up through. There's some bee balm, plenty of parsley, and some elephant garlic. And here and there are some calabrese. So that's the sort of broccoli that we recognise in the supermarkets with the large heads. This is not likely to produce a very large head, but I will be able to take the first head, and then some more will appear around it, more like a sprouting broccoli. In the centre here is a red kale. I'm not growing that for us, I'm actually growing that as a sacrifice plant for butterflies, but as yet there have been very few or even no cabbage white butterflies in the garden, and I don't know whether that's to do with our altitude or whether they just haven't found us yet. And at this end there's more parsley over there, there is that calabrese there, there's some fennel and some rosemary, and then in the corner here is some yacon. Yacon is one of those plants that I would grow even if the tubers weren't edible. It grows to a tall plant, has the most beautiful small yellow flowers, a bit like a sunflower but very small. I just think it's an incredibly pretty plant, so I'm pleased that I've got that going. I've got lots more yacon over there to get into the bed, but this one is doing very well. And here in bed number 7, this echoes and mirrors a lot of the planting in the previous bed. So there's some skirrets there and parsley down the side, but this is a flat leaf parsley rather than a curled parsley. Again, there's plenty of bergamot or bee balm in here. And at this end, there's some thyme. This is Tithonia. It's a beautiful flower. I'm really excited to grow it. It's called Mexican sunflower. With any luck, it'll become quite a large plant with bright orange flowers. Again, there's a kale in here and some calabrese on this side. There's some elephant garlic, and then in the corner is a variegated de Benton's kale, possibly a variety called panache. This is a perennial kale. I haven't grown the variegated one before, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how big that plant gets. I'm also looking forward to taking some more cuttings from it so I can have it elsewhere in the garden. And then in the bed behind me, when I first made this bed a few months ago, I put in some garlic and onions at this end. And I've harvested a little bit of the garlic to use in the kitchen. The rest of it is not quite, but almost ready to come out. As I've seen with lots of people this year, there's quite a lot of rust on it. That's not going to affect the bulb, so it should be fine. And then to grow up through it, so as soon as the onions and the garlic are out, there are brassicas already growing in here. So I've got red cabbages, and that's a variety called Red Acre. And in the centre there is, I think it's purple sprouting broccoli, and now I'm thinking about it, I can't remember. But fingers crossed, that is purple sprouting broccoli. If not, it's yet more of the calabrese. And this is what happens when I don't label things clearly. I haven't added a label in for that centre row, so I really have no idea which it is, except for it is a taller brassica because I've put it in the centre. We'll find out in a few months. Here in bed number 9, it is divided into two. At this end I've got strawberries. Now they're not going to be staying here permanently. I'm going to create a strawberry bed in the food forest, a very long bed where all the strawberries will be. But for now we're due to have quite a nice harvest from them. I can see plenty of strawberries. There's been a lot of rain, so they're filling out. Now hopefully we'll get a bit of sunshine and they'll actually ripen. In the centre there's a herb fennel, that's a bronze fennel. And at this end, at this end it's a bit of a surprise. The label on these said Asturian tree cabbage, and indeed in my last video I talked about it being Asturian tree cabbage, and I have been thinking that the leaves are very, very dark. Asturian tree cabbage, the leaves are more like the colour of my jumper. But to give you an idea of the size of the leaf, they are amazing. So I couldn't quite understand why they were so dark, but thought maybe it's because there's a very rich mixture in this soil. There's an awful lot of horse manure in it, as well as duck bedding. And then last week a friend was around and we were having a look around the garden, and I went, oh, far from being Asturian tree cabbage, this is calabrese. And Mr. J and I have been harvesting from it, and we've been eating meals with calabrese in it. So this morning I have sown some Asturian tree cabbage. It's quite late in the year, but it'll be fine. It's a perennial, it's a short-lived perennial, and there's plenty of growing season left for that to get going. And hopefully this time it will appear with the pale green leaves. There's also some bee balm and some chives around the edges. Bed number 10 has got more flowers than vegetables in it at the moment. So there are some young leeks, with the rest of them waiting to be transplanted, and there's also some Florence fennel in here. That's the bulbing fennel. Now I haven't grown this from seed. I found this at a store in the half price section because it was looking very dry, and I thought, I like a challenge, I'll give it a go. I put it into here, and we have had so much rain and so much warmth that it is now flourishing. I'm really pleased. It's not going to seed yet. It's starting to form that sort of bulbous swollen bit at the base of the stem. I'm really excited that that is going to do well. And the rest of the space in this bed is earmarked for other veg. So I've got a walking onion to go in down there. I've still got some chard. I've got some more lettuce. So there are various different veg that will be going in here, and also some of those leeks will get planted in here too. Bed number 11. There is a hollyhock at this end, which is most often grown for its tall spires of flowers, but you can eat the very small flower buds, cook them a little bit like a sprout. So I'm looking forward next year to trying a couple of those. I will let you know what they're like. I'm a little sceptical about whether I'll enjoy them or not, but it's got to be worth a go. And the rest of the bed has got mostly flowers in it, except interspersed through all the empty soil areas are multi-sown beetroot. And it's a selection of chioggia and bolt hardy. I might have put some golden beetroot in. Possibly at this end there is also some golden beetroot. And then behind me, I'm so happy with this bed. I am so pleased with it. Bed number 12 has a row of chives at the far end, 2 rows of carrots. There's a red core chantenay, then there's an Amsterdam carrot, then these beautiful purple flowers are Canterbury bells. I've never grown these before either. They're growing in here while I'm waiting to create the cut flower beds, but I'm very pleased with those. Then there is a row of autumn king carrots and a double row of parsnips. They're doing okay. It's interesting that that corner seems to be doing better than that corner, and that could be that here the land not only slopes towards that way, but it slopes slightly in that direction, so possibly the plants here are getting a little bit more water than the ones at that end. However, it does look like we're going to have parsnips this year. It does look like we're going to have carrots. In the last couple of weeks I've created 2 more beds. So this is bed number 13. It's 1/3 of the size of all of those beds. And as you can see, it's got some nice flowers in it. So there's lavenders, nasturtiums, monarda, so the bee balm. This is agastache. Is that how you say it? I'm not sure. I think so. But the main reason for this bed is to house some artichokes. So this has got 3 globe artichokes in it. I grew these from seed this year. It's a D Violetta, so it's going to have a purpley artichoke on it. Not this year. It's going to take maybe next year or the year after that before we've got really healthy large plants here, but I'm glad to have got them started off. No, bed number 14 hasn't been made yet. Here are the end pieces for it. But there will be another bed there. And then this is bed 15, so this is a new one. At the moment it's got 3 rhubarb in it. This is Timperley Early. It's been growing in a container for the last nearly 2 years, and it's really not happy. But there is some new growth, so fingers crossed that will be okay. And then on the far side there are some swede, not ones that I've grown from seed. These were in the reduced section in a garden centre, and I thought I would give them a try, given that I'm not very good at growing swede. They never seem to get very large. In the centre here are some cabbages in pots. These are waiting for me to put them into the ground. The label tells me that these are filderkraut again. They actually get quite big, so hopefully the leaves won't block out too much light for the Swedes. I'm really pleased to be able to tell you that I have finally finished filling up these 2 beds and planting our asparagus in here. So in the base there are an awful lot of sticks and wood chips and duck bedding, and then there is a seriously thick layer of sheep's fleece. When our sheep were shorn a few weeks ago, we saved all the fleece to use here in the garden, so I'm very pleased to have got that in. Compost on the top, and that's a bought-in peat-free compost because I don't have homemade compost to use. And then I have planted the asparagus together with some borage and some cosmos, just to give it a bit of colour this year. So the asparagus is in there, and the hope is that this year the fronds will really feed the roots, and so it will help them get very well established. You can see there are some bags of stuff. There's a yellow bag and a blue bag. That's still more sheep fleece, which I'll be using on other beds and to make some compost with. And to help me make masses of compost for using in the garden, we've been creating these compost bays, which will have a cover on them to keep them drier, and then we'll run a rainwater collection system off that take the water down and have it stored down there so it can be gravity fed to elsewhere in the garden. So once this is finished, I'll show you exactly how that's been done. But in the meantime, if you want to see how I fill raised beds, particularly a deep raised bed, without using masses of compost, I'll leave a link on the screen, and if you click on that, it'll take you straight through to that video.